What's up, guys? I'm Naya and I'm from India. My mom raised me all by herself and she didn't have it easy. We were poor. Very poor. She worked as a maid for this super rich family, and when I was 8 years old, I begged my mom to let me work with her too so we could earn extra money. Please, Mom, I want to help. Oh, I don't know. Please. Oh, okay, honey. Thank you. Yay! I was excited, but I didn't really understand how terrible my mom's work was. When we arrived, I was so shocked by how massive the house was. It was a mansion, all white and pristine like a palace. We didn't get to enter through the front since we were considered inferior. So we got a small back entry where we got changed into our uniforms and started our tasks for the day. My mom and I were in the living room cleaning up. I was only 8 years old, so I was pretty clumsy, and I accidentally knocked over a glass of orange juice that was on the table, staining the fluffy white carpet. Naya! I'm sorry, Mama. Oh, it's okay, sweetie. I'll clean this up. While my mom scrubbed frantically, another woman walked into the room. I couldn't stop staring at her. My mom had only told me stories about this woman, but seeing her in person was a whole other experience. She was the wife of the household. She had the tightest skin I'd ever seen. It was stretched out like rice paper through years of Botox and surgery. She wore a white dress as if she was going to the Oscars instead of just relaxing at home, with a giant diamond necklace. She approached us, and when she spotted the stain, she shrieked like a crow.
Oh my God, you imbecile!
My mom quickly stood up at attention.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Singh. I'll clean this up right away. Are you kidding? The stain will never come out.
I promise it will. Just give me time to...
Don't interrupt me, you idiot!
Mrs. Singh raised her hand and backhanded my mom right across the cheek. At that point, I lost it. You leave my mama alone! I launched myself at Mrs. Singh and bit her on the leg. She screamed and raised her hands as if to hit me too, when suddenly a man walked into the room. He caught Mrs. Singh's hand mid-air and pulled her away. What is going on here? It was Mr. Singh, the husband of the household. He had on a business suit and it seemed like he was about to leave for work.
Mr. Singh, please, we accidentally spilled some juice on the carpet, but I can get the stain out.
Seriously, Brenda? This is what you're screaming about?
But...
Ella, Naya, I'm so sorry for my wife's behavior. Please, leave. I'll handle this. My mom and I were still shaken from Mrs. Singh's behavior, but I was glad Mr. Singh was there to handle it all. The next day, when we received our list of tasks for the day, Mom groaned. She had been assigned all the bathroom duties, the most disgusting and hardest tasks of the house. We knew Mrs. Singh was the one behind it. This was her way of punishing my mom. While my mom headed to the bathroom, I went to the garden where I was supposed to clear out the weeds. The sun was boiling, and I actually felt like my skin was melting off my bones. I pulled out weed after weed after weed, wondering how my mom was doing, when suddenly I heard a splash behind me. Some boy had just jumped into the pool. The Singhs didn't have a son, so I was curious who this strange boy was. Hey, you! The boy was talking to me. What? Come in and swim. I can't. I have to clean up this garden. Oh, come on. Don't be such a party pooper. But The boy splashed some water at me. I gasped. Hey, stop it! Come in! Suddenly, the boy leapt out of the water and pulled me in. Whoa! No! We fell into the pool. Water splashed everywhere and I was drenched. When we resurfaced, the boy introduced himself. I'm Ramesh. I couldn't help it. I should have been mad, but I started laughing. Nice to meet you, Ramesh. I'm Naya.
What is going on here?
We turned suddenly. Mrs. Singh was there, and she looked as red as the planet Mars. Aw, come on, Auntie. We're just having fun.
Ramesh, come out this second.
Ramesh smiled apologetically at me, then hopped out of the pool. As they left, Mrs. Singh sent me a look as sharp as daggers. I sighed, climbed out of the pool, and got changed. Unknown to Ramesh, his aunt later came back to tell me to do double the original tasks I had for that day. Life wasn't too bad though. Ramesh and I hung out all the time, and usually it was just Ramesh tagging along while I did work. He often came to his aunt and uncle's house on weekends or for school breaks, and that way we got to see each other a lot. Mrs. Singh hated seeing us together though, but usually we managed to keep it a secret. Life was getting better, until one day it all came crashing down. My mom and I were scrubbing the floor when suddenly I saw Mom start to close her eyes. Mom? Mom collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Mom! I screamed for help as I tried to wake my mom up. Eventually, some of the other maids and servants arrived. Then Mr. Singh appeared. My mom, you have to help. She just collapsed. Please. Don't worry, Naya. She'll be all right. Then, like some sort of prince, Mr. Singh lifted my mom into his arms and carried her away. There was something about the look on his face when he cradled my mom that made me curious, but I was too worried to think about it too much. At the hospital, the doctors told us Mom was overstressed and needed to rest for a few days. By this point, my mom was awake, and when she heard the doctors say this, she immediately protested. No, I have to work, I have to earn money. If we don't, we won't be able to eat, pay rent, Ella. Mr. Singh held my mom's hand. Everything will be okay. You can stay in our spare bedroom while you rest. But Naya? Naya can stay with us too. Don't worry, I'll still pay for the days you miss while you rest.
Sweetie, is that really a good idea?
Brenda, not now. Mrs. Singh bit her lip. I could tell she hated the idea of my mom living in the same house as her, even though they had over 10 spare bedrooms. But I'll be honest, if my husband had spoken and touched a woman the way Mr. Singh touched my mom, I would have been concerned too. After a while, the doctors wanted to run some more tests on my mom, so we all had to leave. As I walked out, Ramesh was there waiting for me. We stood there staring at each other for a while. Then, Ramesh offered a hug. We embraced each other, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I let go, sobbing on his shoulder. Throughout Mom's recovery period, Ramesh was there for me the whole time. I never could have gotten through it without him. Years passed, and my mom was much better. Mr. Singh only allowed her to work 4 days a week instead of 7, while I picked up more hours, so now I became the main source of income for our family. One day, when I was 15, I entered my mom's room to give her some food, but her bed was empty. She's probably at the store. I forgot all about it and went to Mr. and Mrs. Singh's bedroom because I was supposed to mop the floors there. But when I entered, I got the shock of my life. Sitting on the bed, making out like some sort of Hollywood movie couple, was Mr. Singh and my mom. Oh my god! They broke apart and looked at me in alarm. Naya, I can explain.
What the heck?
My heart dropped. Mrs. Singh was behind me looking through the doorway, and when she spotted Mom and her husband, she screamed until it felt like the whole house was shaking.
Are you kidding? You're cheating on me with the maid?
Honey, look,
Yes, go on, explain yourself. That's it. You.
Mrs. Singh pointed at my mom.
You're fired, and you can bring your bratty daughter with you.
I looked at Mr. Singh, expecting him to step in and do something, but he just looked away. I scoffed. Come on, Mom, we don't need them. Mom sighed sadly, and we packed our things up and left. As it turned out, we really did need them. No one would hire us again after that, and my guess is that Mrs. Singh contacted everyone she could and banned them from hiring us, ruining our reputations. My mom and I became homeless and lived under a bridge with the other homeless people. One night, when we were getting ready for bed on our cardboard sheets, we heard a commotion down the other end of the bridge. Quickly, we rushed over to see what was happening, and I was surprised to see Ramesh there. Hey, get off! One of the homeless people was trying to steal his watch. I rushed over and stepped between them. He's with me. The man recognized me and backed away. I dragged Ramesh over to our little nook and sat him down. What are you doing here? It's not safe. I had to come see you. I have an offer for you. An offer? I want you and your mom to come work for my family. It's on the other side of town, but it's good money and we'll treat you kindly, unlike my auntie. But your parents, are you sure? Don't worry, my parents hate auntie. They would love to have you. Oh, Ramesh, thank you. I hugged him, and the next day we got started right away. Turns out Ramesh was just as rich as his aunt and uncle. His house wasn't as big as theirs, but it was still absurdly enormous with a giant swimming pool and a garden as big as a national park. While my mom got started cleaning the floors of the bedrooms, Ramesh told me he had a special task for me in his room. When we arrived, he shut the door and looked at me mischievously. Surprise! You don't have to do any work. What? I told my parents that you can be my tutor so you can work and earn money here without doing any actual work. Wow, Ramesh, that's so nice of you, but why would you do that for me? Ramesh blushed. Well, you see, actually, I really like you. Electricity shot through my heart. Oh, wow, we stood there for a bit, unsure what to do. But then I took a deep breath and just went for it. I kissed Ramesh, and pretty soon we held on to each other dearly. But then suddenly the door opened and my mom walked in, her broom in hand. Oh! My mom froze. Ignore me. She left quickly and shut the door. Ramesh and I grinned sheepishly at each other. It looked like life was good again. The next day, Ramesh's family was having dinner at his house. This time, I actually had to do some work, and me and my mom were in charge of serving the guests. The dinner bell rang, and we emerged from the kitchen with the dinner. As we handed each guest their plates, I looked up in alarm as Mr. and Mrs. Singh were there. Mr. Singh was staring at my mom while my mom tried to avoid his eye contact, and Mrs. Singh was staring at her husband. Eventually, Mom went to give Mrs. Singh her meal, when suddenly, Mrs. Singh jutted out her elbow, hitting my mom and causing the tray of meals to fall to the floor. Mr. Singh had a lobster on his shoulder. He quickly flicked it off and tried to help my mom. Please stop, I don't need your help. Mr. Singh hesitated, then got back in his seat while Mom and I cleared it all up. When we left, I could see Mrs. Singh sniggering at my mom. It was so unfair. Later, for dessert, my mom gave everyone their food. Mrs. Singh took one bite of her cake, then she started coughing uncontrollably. Are there nuts in here? There shouldn't be. Mrs. Singh collapsed to the floor and started choking. We called an ambulance, and luckily Ramesh's mom had a peanut allergy injection on hand. Thankfully, Mrs. Singh regained consciousness and the swelling died down, but as soon as she was okay, she looked at my mom.
You're going to jail for this.
What?
You tried to kill me.
While murmurs spread through the dinner table, Ramesh took me and Mom away to the kitchen. Ramesh, Mom didn't do it. She would never. I know. Look, there's something I have to tell you. Earlier on, when everyone was distracted, I saw Mr. Singh head into the kitchen. I was curious what he was going to do, so I followed him, and you'll never believe what I saw. He spiked Mrs. Singh's cake with some peanuts. Oh my God. You don't think... Did he do it on purpose? Was he really trying to kill his own wife? Maybe. He might have done it so he could get her out of the way and, I don't know, maybe get back with your mom? We have to tell Mrs. Singh so she doesn't sue my mom. No, we can't. What? But why? I don't want to get Amar into trouble. But Mom, you're being falsely accused of murder. But no, I'm dealing with this now. I burst into the dining room and stood up on the table. I explained everything to the whole audience. Ramesh stood up on the table too and confirmed my case. Everyone was so shocked, but no one was more shocked than Mrs. Singh. She took one look at her husband, then slapped him across the face.
You're lucky I love money too much to divorce you.
Mrs. Singh turned to my mom.
Ella, look, I'm so sorry. I know I've been hard on you. You're a kind woman and you've been nothing but accepting of me. Can you forgive me?
My mom hesitated, but then she smiled. Of course. I sighed with relief. Ramesh grinned and I winked at him. It looked like things would get better after all.
Yeah! I urged the horse on as we galloped away from the bandits chasing me. Get back here! I held the small treasure chest in my hands closer to me. You'll never get my treasure! The bandits soon overtook me and circled around me. One of them moved closer, scaring my horse and causing him to rear back. Whoa! There, boy! I lost my grip of the chest and it fell to the ground. No! Ha ha! The treasure's mine! But before the bandit could get his grimy hands on my treasure, I brought out my lasso and looped it around the chest, dragging it back into my hands. We galloped away, speeding far from those evil bandits. I found this treasure fair and square. All they wanted to do was steal it from me. Suddenly, I heard a loud ringtone. Someone was calling me. I held the reins of the horse and the chest in one hand, then swiped to answer my phone with the other. Hello? Bianca! What's up? Who is this? Antonio! Oh, hi, bud. Listen, I'm kind of busy right now. You're gonna wanna hear this. You remember the precious ruby skull we thought was only a myth? Yes? Well, it's not a myth, Bianca. It's real. Some of my guys found a map that seems legit. I think this is it. Our dream come true. Send me the location. I'll be there soon. I hung up and dropped the treasure chest on the ground. You can keep the treasure, I called back to the chasing bandits. I found something much better. We rode all the way to my personal plane that I had parked out in the desert. I dismounted my horse. Go on, boy. Be free. The horse seemed to nod and strutted off. I boarded the plane, started up the engines, and was already off on my way to Antonio. Howdy, y'all. My name's Bianca. Please like and subscribe. Growing up, my life was pretty sad. I was an orphan in this rotten orphanage. I thought my life would be miserable for the rest of my life. Until one special day. When I was 8 years old, I was in the backyard of the orphanage playing with some tin cans.
Come on, brother! Let's go find the treasure! Oh no! Look out! A booby trap!
I heard the gate open and an old man walked in. He was very old, but I could tell that he was handsome once. And probably fit. I couldn't stop staring at the big hat on his head. I was mesmerized by it.
Who are you?
The man looked at me. The name's Joe.
Joe? That's a funny name.
The man chuckled. I suppose it is. What's your name?
Bianca.
The man looked at my tin cans. What's up with these guys?
They're explorers.
You like to explore?
Yes.
I looked down.
But I'll never become an explorer.
The old man seemed to be thinking. Then finally, he knelt beside me, and I felt a slight pressure as he placed his hat on my head. Here, keep this. My time for adventure is over, but yours is just beginning. My eyes widened.
Really?
Yes. Don't give up, kid. Never give up. Adventure is waiting for you. You just gotta go look for it. He smiled, stood up, then left as suddenly as he'd appeared. I always remember that day, because it was the day when I became certain I would find adventure in my life. Antonio had been an orphan too, and when I told him about my meeting with Joe, he'd been super excited as well.
Let's be explorers! Yes, we'll be explorers together!
There was one particular treasure that we both dreamed of finding. We discovered the treasure in an old book at the local library.
The ruby skull. An ancient treasure left behind by an ancient tribe called the Lamolkas. Antonio, we have to find it! We must!
Years passed, and after I left the orphanage, I worked hard and saved enough money to book a flight to the Amazon. And that was where I stumbled upon the first ever treasure I would find in my career as an explorer. It was exhilarating when I opened up that chest to find hundreds of gold coins. Since then, I've found much more treasure. But as soon as Antonio called to say he might know where the ruby skull is, I soon forgot about all the other treasure. This was it! My dream adventure! I steered the plane over to the location Antonio had sent me. I slowly descended and spotted Antonio and some other people waving from a clearing. I landed the plane, and as soon as I got off, Antonio crushed me in a hug. Bianca, old friend! It's been too long! Way too long, brother! I see you still have Joe's hat. I nodded. Of course. I'll keep it forever. I smiled, then glanced at the other two people. Who is this? These are my good friends, Macy and Charles. They're both explorers as well. I figured we could use their help. Sure. Macy didn't even smile. She just nodded, then glanced away. What was her problem? Charles, on the other hand, gave me a beaming smile and bowed. I've heard a lot about you, Bianca. You're a legend amongst us explorers. I grinned. You hear that, Antonio? I'm a legend. Yeah. Antonio chuckled. Okay, guys. Are we ready? We all nodded. The entrance is this way. Antonio led us over to the entrance to an ancient ruin, what must have been an old temple. We walked down the staircase that led far underground. I brought out my torch as I peered around at the old stone and small engravings on the walls. It's so dark down here. We entered a small, empty room. What now? I started to wander around, when suddenly I heard a crunch and looked down to see a broken jar. Oops! What are you doing? Suddenly, the whole world seemed to shake, and we looked up in panic to see the exit closing up. Within seconds, we were trapped underground. Great! Just perfect! Now we're trapped! I'm sorry, guys, but don't worry. Maybe this was supposed to happen. Maybe... I thought you were a legend. Clearly the legends were false. Because you're nothing but a lousy explorer. Hey, leave her alone! Charles went to stand by my side. She tried her best. Guys, please. Oh, so now you're on her side. Fine, be that way. Macy stormed off, only to sit down in the far corner of the room. It would have been rather hilarious if we weren't in such a dangerous situation. If we didn't find a way out, we'd die from starvation very soon. Why don't we look for clues? Maybe Bianca's right. Maybe this was supposed to happen. We all spread out. Well, except for Macy, who chose to sit and brood, and started to search for clues. I was walking along, inspecting the engravings on the walls, when I discovered a symbol I had seen before. I remembered. On the back cover of the book from the library, the book about the ruby skull, this had been on the cover. Guys, come look! Everyone gathered around me as I nervously pressed on the symbol. Then, like magic, the symbol glowed a bright red, and a huge section of the wall slid back to reveal another room, bigger than the previous one, with beds, food, and water. Looks like this is our resting point. It would be good to take a break and a little nap. Nice work, Bianca. I winked at Charles and he blushed. Macy pushed through and shoved Charles aside before plopping down on one of the beds. Yeah, nice work, I suppose. I barked a laugh at Macy and winked at her too. Was it just me, or did she blush even more than Charles did? Pretty soon, we all went to sleep. But when I woke up a few hours later, I got the shock of my life. Antonio was missing. Antonio? Where are you? Where could he have gone? There's only 2 rooms. Do you think he found a secret pathway? No, he wouldn't have left us behind. Maybe someone took him. Who? The curse of the ruby skull. Is that even real? Maybe. Honestly, you're not being helpful right now. While those two continued bickering, I started to search Antonio's bed, where I found a note under his pillow. Guys, stop fighting! Come look at this! Tentatively, they gathered around me as we read the note. Miss him? Follow the clues to find your treasure. Clue number 1. No one can hear you down here, except, of course, for the doors. The doors? What does that mean? I sat there silently for a few minutes, thinking. Bianca, what are you thinking? I'm thinking... Guys, just follow my lead. And then, out of nowhere, I began screaming loudly. As loud as I could. Macy and Charles stared at me as if I had lost my mind, which I guess was understandable seeing how I was acting very weird. Come on, guys, just trust me. I screamed again, louder and louder, and I saw Macy shrug, then scream with me. Charles was more hesitant, but finally he relented and joined us in our screaming performance. 30 seconds passed and nothing had happened. But then suddenly there was a grinding noise and a giant rock moved to reveal a small tunnel, just big enough for us to crawl through. Yes! We did it! Macy squealed in excitement. Bianca, you're a genius! She hugged me and I stood there awkwardly. I mean, that was okay, I guess. Charles looked at us. That was strange. Come on, guys! Let's find Antonio! We crawled into the tunnel and crawled for what seemed like ages, until finally we emerged into a giant cavern. There was what looked like a bridge leading downhill. On either side of the bridge, there was darkness. I had no idea how far the drop was. Right at the entrance to the tunnel was a single skull that had giant ruby jewels in its eye sockets. Is this the ruby skull? No, it can't be. It's too easy. Let me see. Wait, Charles, don't! Too late! Charles lifted the skull, and instantly it dissolved into dust. We heard a loud, thundering boom, and suddenly behind us, a wall crumbled to reveal a giant ball of stone, heading straight for us. Run! We took off at full speed. Charles and Macy dove out of the way and avoided being squished, but when I leapt, my foot slipped and I went tumbling over the side. Luckily, I managed to grab hold of a protruding rock just in time, but I was quickly losing my grip. Help! Someone grabbed hold of my hand. I looked up, expecting to see Charles, but it was Macy. Hold on! She let out a cry and dragged me up and back to safety. I fell over and landed on top of her. We stared at each other for a while. Macy had just saved my life. This is awkward. I hurriedly stood up, moving away from Macy. I felt my face warm. Was I blushing now? We should get going. Yeah, sure. I led the way down the bridge, but just when I thought we'd gotten through the worst of it, we emerged into another room, a giant cavern with a raised throne. Antonio sat on the throne with a crown on his head. Antonio! At first, I was happy to see him, but when I moved to embrace him, he didn't budge. Oh, you're alive. Huh? You're supposed to be dead. Antonio? What are you talking about? Ugh! For once, can you just fail? Is that too much to ask? I don't understand. Macy stepped forward, understanding on her face. He set us up. He wanted us to get killed. What? You never found the ruby skull, did you? Antonio smiled evilly. Nope. Antonio! But why? Antonio turned eyes of hatred to me. Is it not obvious? Are you seriously too thick in the head to know why? We grew up together. We dreamt of being explorers together. Oh, yes, we did. And now we are explorers. Except whenever I get around to finally finding the treasure, I only discover that you've already stolen it. You've taken over the treasure hunting industry, Bianca. You have to be eliminated. I didn't know. I don't care about the treasure. If you wanted it, you should have just asked. I only care about adventure. Ha! You really expect me to believe that? Yes! Enough of this. It's time to take you out once and for all. Antonio raised a bow and arrow, hid him behind the throne. He looked me in the eyes. Goodbye, Bianca. Ah! Antonio pulled back the arrow. I was going to die. But then, out of nowhere, Macy appeared, leaping in front of me, shielding me with her body. No! The arrow streamed towards us, but my body moved of its own accord. And suddenly, my whip flickered out and hit the arrow away in midair. I didn't even know I was capable of doing that. Antonio howled. Curse you, Bianca! Suddenly, the whole cave started to shake. The whole place is gonna go down! We have to get out of here! Grab hold of me! I swung my lasso and aimed for an opening above where I could see daylight. By a miracle, the lasso caught hold of something and Macy, Charles, and I all climbed up the rope. The whole place was truly falling to pieces now. I looked back in and called out to Antonio. My brother, please, come, get out of there. No, he looked very sad then. I'm sorry. Then a boulder fell over and Antonio disappeared. Bianca, come on! Reluctantly, I climbed up the rope and we all emerged above in the fresh air. We all caught our breath. Then I looked at Macy. She had leapt in front of me to save my life. Macy, you could have died. Why? Macy looked away. Yes? I like you, okay? Like me... what? I have a crush on you! My cheeks reddened. Oh. What? I don't know if you feel the same way, but... No! I took a deep breath, then grabbed hold of her hand. I would love to go on a date with you. Macy smiled in relief. Charles, meanwhile, looked as confused as ever. Okay, out of everything we've experienced today, that's the most shocking thing. Oh, shut up. I laughed too, but then I looked back to the entrance of the underground caves. Antonio was gone. I was sad, but I guess it was better this way.
Hi, my name is Darla and I'm from Italy. I often wonder if my life would have turned out differently if I didn't have this scar. Before I tell you my crazy story, please like and subscribe. I was blessed to grow up in a loving family. Dad was a teacher and Mom had an online business, so she was always there for me when I needed her. My family was perfect. But one night, my world was turned upside down. Even though I was 5 at the time, I remember it like it was yesterday. Mom and Dad were preparing dinner and I was sitting by the kitchen table. Suddenly, a masked man entered the kitchen and Mom grabbed me in front of her. Dad tried to ward off the intruder with the knife in his hand, but the intruder snatched me from Mom and threw me into Dad's path. I felt a sharp pain on my face and Mom screamed. The relationship with Dad wasn't the same when I was released from the hospital. Dad couldn't bear to stay in the same room that I was in. He no longer looked at me or hugged me. One day, Dad went to work and he never returned. I was heartbroken, and for years I blamed myself. If it wasn't for this ugly scar, then maybe Dad would still be around. As I went through school, kids and teachers were mean about my scar. I tried to make friends, but one girl named Charlotte told everyone that I had an infectious disease and nobody wanted to play with me. I resorted to wearing a mask in hopes that things may change, but it didn't. The last straw was when a teacher placed my lunch in a dog bowl and ordered me to eat it. Mom removed me from the school, but she was also able to get the teacher fired. Mom homeschooled me, and I was happier than I'd been in a long time. But then, life took a turn for the worse. Grandma, Dad's mom, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she had a heart condition. Nobody knew where Dad was, so Mom and I dropped everything and went to help her. Sadly for me, I was enrolled in school once again when I turned 15. On the first day of school, as I walked through the hallway, a group of boys walked up to me. One threw his arms around my shoulder and I shrugged him off. "Babe, I just wanted to say hi to the new girl. My name's Dean." "Hi. So, are you gonna show me what's under the mask?" "No." "Then I'll just have to see for myself." The boy snatched the mask from my face, dropped it on the ground, and howled with laughter after he got a look at my scar. Then he pushed me to the floor. He and his goons ran away making animal noises. I'm Caleb. Sorry about that." A hot guy extended his hand to me, and he helped me up. "Dean and his group of clowns are always up to no good. Are you okay?" I nodded. Suddenly, a girl pulled Caleb away.
What are you doing?
"Jasmine, I'm just helping a friend."
Friend? She isn't even pretty. Did you see what was under the mask? She needs to wear a sign that says don't feed the animals.
Jessica and her minions laughed and dragged Caleb away. The day passed uneventfully until the last period. While doodling in my book, the teacher walked in and greeted the class. My heart stopped. My eyes widened as I looked up. Dad! I hadn't seen Dad in 9 years. Everyone stared at us in silence. "I'm sorry, I think you've mistaken me for someone else." My heart swirled as the students laughed and pointed at me.
First, she needs a new face. Now she's looking for a new daddy.
I grabbed my belongings and ran home crying. How could he not remember his own daughter? Was he ashamed of me because of my scar? At home, I sat in my bedroom and looked out the window deep in thought.
A penny for your thoughts.
Grandma walked into the room and sat on my bed next to me. I told Grandma about my day and I begged her not to tell Mom about me seeing Dad. Later, while I was doing homework, Mom knocked on my door.
"Darla, can you please pick these up at the store?"
She handed me a list of groceries.
"I'm going to get ready to take up a shift at Susie's Cafe."
Mom's business was slow, so she had found a job in a cafe a few blocks away. I quickly made my way to the store. As I stood in the store, holding a box of cereal, someone spoke right behind me. "Hey, Darla." I dropped the cereal and turned to the voice. It was Caleb. Caleb and I bent down to pick up the cereal and bounced our heads. As I rubbed my head, embarrassed, Caleb picked up the cereal and handed it to me. "Do you live close by?" "Yes, I live about 2 blocks away with Mom and Grandma."
Caleb!
Jasmine's voice called from down the aisle. "I'll see you in school, okay?" I nodded and watched as Caleb hustled towards Jasmine. What kind of hold did she have on Caleb? On my way home, I saw Dad with a boy who looked about 5 years of age and a woman. I walked over to them, but when he saw me coming, he tried to cross the street. I ran to him and grabbed his arm. "Why don't you want to talk to me, Dad?" "I don't know who you are. Please, get out of our way."
Babe, who is this girl?
"I have no idea." "I just wanted to let you know that Grandma, your mother, is sick. Or are you going to pretend she doesn't exist either? While you are able to go on with your life, Mom and I had to drop everything to move here. You're not only a lousy father, but you're a lousy son too." I kicked Dad in his shin and ran home. After that incident, we got a new teacher in Dad's place. We both avoided each other at school. One morning during assembly, the theater arts teacher announced that the school decided to have a talent show to raise funds for new computers, and they needed a few kids to be on the committee. I raised my hand and smiled when Caleb did the same. Jasmine glared at him, and I expected her to raise her hand as well, but she didn't. Over the next few days, Caleb and I worked closely together and became good friends. He was charming and funny, and I had a huge crush on him. Every time I saw him, my heart fluttered and my cheeks would turn bright red. One evening after meeting, Caleb offered to walk me home. In my mind, I jumped for joy, but outside I smiled and calmly said, "Okay, sure." We talked and laughed as we walked. Suddenly, I tripped on a crack in the pavement and felt myself falling forward. Caleb grabbed my arm and steadied me. "Are you okay?" I nodded. Caleb slid his fingers down my arm and held my hand. "Just make sure you don't stumble again." The week leading up to the talent show, Grandma got really sick and I wanted to drop out of the committee to spend more time with her. "Darla, a lot of people are counting on you. Grandma wouldn't want you to drop out. She'd want you to finish what you started." Finally, it was the night of the talent show. "Are you ready to go on?" Caleb squeezed my hand. I nodded. Just then, Jasmine appeared out of nowhere and snatched the mask from my face and ran away. I covered my face. The worst part was I didn't have another mask. "Caleb, I can't go on stage like this." My eyes filled with tears. Caleb lowered my hands and gently traced my scar. He kissed me lightly on the lips. "Darla, you're the most beautiful girl in the world, with the most beautiful voice. People will love you." Seeing my hesitancy, he added, "I'll dim the lights, okay?" I nodded. I heard my name called and waited until Caleb dimmed the lights to walk out on stage. During my performance, I was so into my song that I didn't realize that Caleb turned the lights all the way up. I finished my performance, and sweat formed on my brow as I expected the usual slur of mean words. Suddenly, the audience cheered and applauded. I took a bow and waved into the audience. It was then I noticed Mom at the entrance, and she looked worried. I hustled off the stage and approached Mom. "Mom, what's wrong?" "We need to get home. Grandma may not make it through the night." That night, Mom and I stayed by Grandma's side until she passed away peacefully. At Grandma's funeral, Dad showed up. I wasn't about to be silent about it. I marched over to him. "What are you doing here? You have the audacity to show up after you've been avoiding me at school? I told you Grandma was sick and you ignored me. Grandma needed you when she was alive, not now that she's dead." I tried to claw at Dad's face, but Mom pulled me back just in time and carried me outside the church. "Darla, I know you don't like your dad, but causing a scene at Grandma's funeral isn't right. What did you mean Dad's been avoiding you at school?" I then admitted to Mom that Dad was a teacher at the school. "I don't want to go back to that school again. I want to be homeschooled. I can't bear to see Dad ever again." A few days later, Mom and I went to the reading of Grandma's will. Dad didn't show up. Mom inherited everything. Before we left, the lawyer handed Mom a letter. After Grandma's death, I refused to go outside. I'd just curl up in Grandma's bed and wish that she was still with us. One afternoon, there was a knock on the door. Mom asked me to get it since she was preparing lunch. Reluctantly, I opened the door and I was shocked. "Dad, what are you doing here? You're not welcome here." I slammed the door in Dad's face, and when I turned around, Mom stood behind me. "Darla, what did you do?" Mom rushed to the door and opened it. "I'm so sorry about that. Please come in." "Mom, after all he did, you're letting him in?" "I invited him over." Then Mom told me something that shook me to my core. "Darla, this is not your father." "What? I'm adopted?" Mom shook her head and rolled her eyes. "No, silly. This is your father's brother, Stephen. I felt sick to my stomach as flashbacks of how I treated Uncle Stephen replayed in my mind. I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me? He smiled. I guess I can make an exception for my favorite niece. Mom told us that in the letter given by my lawyer, which was written by Grandma, she admitted to having twin boys. She was 18 when they were born and she didn't have enough money to keep both of them. So she put Stephen up for adoption. She wrote the letter when she was diagnosed because she didn't want to die with the guilt she's been living with for all these years. After our discussion with Uncle Stephen, I agreed to go back to school. I couldn't wait to see Caleb.
I still can't believe you actually kissed her. Ew!
You told me if I kissed her that I'd get to take you out. I won the bet, so I'll pick you up Friday at 7. I couldn't believe what I just heard. Caleb had been playing me all this time just to score a date with Jessica. I turned around and headed back to the house. When I got home, I decided to enter through the kitchen. I didn't want to have to explain to Mom why I was home, at least not now anyway. When I got inside, I heard Mom and Uncle Stephen talking in the living room. Jen, why do you want to try to kill him again? You already got money from the old lady.
It's not enough. I need more, and Kirby still has me as a beneficiary of his will.
How do you know that?
The same way I found out years ago that you and Kirby were brothers.
I have my sources.
He's staying at the Hilton Hotel off Wrightston Road. At least this time, you won't put my daughter in harm's way.
This couldn't be happening. Uncle Stephen was the intruder. He was the reason I had this scar. And Mom set everything up. She wanted to kill my dad. For all I knew, she could have killed Grandma. I slipped out of the kitchen and ran all the way to the bus station. I needed to get to Dad before Uncle Stephen did.